The first one I told you I was gonna give you guys this diagram. Okay. So again, let's kind of look at them even before. Go ahead and since you're allowed to write on the exam, guys, go and label everything. So you go in here and let's kind of. There you go, much better. Okay. So this one right here is leading to the liver, so that's gonna be your hepatic, right? Okay, that's hepatic portal vein. That one, if you follow it to the spleen, that's gonna be your splenic. Your right gastric epiploid right behind it, right underneath it. And
I'm sorry, do you have the test? Or like the test, the packet?
The actual test.
Like that.
oh, the physical test, no, I have it in my office.
Oh.
Yes. So like, if you like, one further explanation, just kind of like go in and meet in the office, and so now you have. Okay. So again, so it's gonna be your so your splenic, okay, your right gastric epiploid, hepatic portal vein, and then the superior and the inferior mesenteric. You see them? Okay? And then you would just label them. So you here. So the splenic vein would be B, and the one is, see, it leads to the spleen. The superior mesenteric, this one, E. The inferior mesenteric would be structure D, this one right here. The hepatic portal vein would be A, and then your right gastric epiploid would be C. Okay? So this one, there was no repeats, it was just one for each one. So now, you ask me 5 questions and there's five choices, obviously there's not gonna be any repeats. The only time any repeats is if you only have like 3-4 labels and I'm asking you like 6-7 questions, right? So obviously there will be a repeat. But you can always ask me like, are there any repeats? And I will tell you like no or yes, okay. So question number 2, so let me see. For this one, I have 2 people missed number 1, 5 people missed number 2, 2 people missed number 3, 1 person missed number 4, and 5 people missed number 5. So if you were a matter of probably just confused, here you go. You probably just confused some of the messages, but that's okay. It's a very small number. Okay. Okay. Then I told you that I was gonna give you a couple of these different vessels, and then you would match them by what they supply, what they provide for. Okay. So obviously, you see, you have five choices, and you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 questions. So one is gonna repeat twice. So the largest artery of the body is going to be your aorta. We know that that's the one that pumps everything, right? Supplies the kidney, that would be your renal artery. It's the only one that makes sense in terms of like renal, you just remember artery with kidney. Supplies the duodenum and the stomach, that was gonna be your common hepatic artery, okay? And that was one of the functions that we talked about, the duodenum, the pancreas, the stomach, all of the, supplies the distal areas of the large intestine. If it's distally, is further down, it's gonna be the inferior mesenteric. The superior serves the closer regions, and then the mesenteric, right? And then it supplies the pelvic structures, that was the internal iliac. We talked about that one, providing the prostate and the, we talked about all the structures that it provides for the pelvic structures, okay? And then our artery that does not anastomose, that is pretty straightforward, that would be the renal artery. Everything else has all these branches.
I thought it branches out into 2 for the kidney though, so.
No. Because those are paired. We call them paired. No, within the arteries that we have like all these collaterals.
Oh,
Okay. Yeah, each one is its own. Yeah, I mean it's 2, but it doesn't like it's not like a whole bunch of different branching like collaterals. Okay, so. Okay. All right. So anyways, so on those 6 to 11, and we have the numbers. 1 missed 6, 1 missed 7, 3 people missed 8, 4 people missed 9, 2 people missed 10, and then like 8 people missed 11. Okay. So you guys see kind of like where you messed up in there? All right. Then we get a few multiple choice questions. Okay. Again, which of the following chemicals does not help to regulate blood pressure? Does ADH does? Yes, right? It's a straight. Does natriuretic peptide does? Yes, that's the one when you pee too much, when your pressure is too high, you start peeing out salt. Okay. Angiotensin 2, yes, that's the one that starts all the cascade of regulating pressure. We didn't even talk about what's nitric acid. We didn't even talk, okay? So I hope no one chose like, let's say 12. 4 people missed this one, okay? What do you guys choose? I'm just kind of curious.
They probably chose B.
The nature, the AMP?
Yes.
Yeah, remember? We said we have a cluster in the heart, and that's why we pee out salt so that we don't retain water. And by doing that, we drop the pressure. Number 13, which statement best describes arteries? They all carry blood away from the heart. This one was the questioning which I told you, know the general differences between arteries and veins. I just put it in that. I didn't ask you what's the difference between arteries and veins. You needed to know like the main functions of those. 14, the tunic that contains the endothelium, that's the intima. That's going to be the innermost layer. Number 14, let's see, 14, 5 people missed this one, guys. That was just a matter of like knowing the tunics. Okay, so make sure that you guys don't miss the easy ones, okay? Number 15, permitting the exchange of nutrients and gases between blood and tissues. We know that the functional level is going to be at the level of the capillaries, because that's where all the gas exchange and nutrient exchange happens. Not at the arterial veins or arteries, because the pressure is too high. Okay, you need to slow down. Number 15, 7 of you missed this one. Okay, so exchange of nutrients, always think capillaries. This one pops out a lot, like on T's test, MCAT, VCAT, all of these. Okay, you need to know that the capillaries are the sites of gas exchange and nutrient exchange. Number 16, the circulatory route that runs from the digestive tract to the liver is hepatic, right? The digestive tract includes superior mesenteric, inferior mesenteric, splenic, right? Gastric employed. All of the ones we just saw in the first 5 questions, all of those leads to the hepatic portal circulation. It wasn't pulmonary, it wasn't coronary, and it wasn't cerebral, right? We talked about this one, number 16. No one missed it, so I'm happy everybody figured out that liver hepatic. Number 17. Pulse pressure is systolic minus diastolic. One person missed this one, guys. Okay? One person this one. So I just told you the next one. Peripheral resistance. This one increases as blood viscosity increases. We said what were the major factors that increase resistance? The viscosity of the blood, the length of the vessel, and the diameter. Right? So in other words, if with an increasing length of the decreases, no, it would be increases, right? B increases as the diameter increases, no, that would decrease because the diameter increases. And then increases as the viscosity increases, yes, that would be it because it makes the blood thicker and harder to flow. Number 10, people miss this one, guys. Okay?
I have a question about that one.
Yes, sir.
How come it increases with increasing length of blood vessel?
Because the longer the vessel is, right? The longer the longer which one?
Number 18. It's the opposite of like what is it? It does not decrease.
With the length?
Yeah.
No, because with the longer the length is, the more resistance you're going to encounter. Because you have to go through a longer distance. Okay. Yeah. Okay, number 18, the hepatic portal vein carries nutrient-rich blood to the liver from all those areas in the viscera, from the gut and all of those. Okay. 6 of you missed number 19. Number 20, the ductus venosus was that special fetal vessel that allows the umbilical blood to bypass the liver. That one was directly from the study guide. We talked about, in addition to the foramen ovale and the ligamentum arteriosus, this one is the one that bypasses, because I told you that the liver of the baby is non-functional at that time, so the mother's liver needs to do the cleanup, okay? So for number 20, 3 people missed it, so that means the majority remembered that structure. All right, then we get to this ones here. So we look at the structures here. See, the A is going to be like the left subclavian, so that's going to be the entrance to the thoracic of the left side, right, of the thoracic duct. And then C is going to be like the thoracic, all of this part from the cisterna chyli up is going to be part of the thoracic duct. D is the cisterna chyli, where we store that fat. And then E is the collecting vessels. And then over here are the axillary nodes. All right, so let's kind of, now that we kind of like label them, and go ahead. So the axillary nodes, B, the cisterna chyli, D, the little balloon, the entrance of the thoracic duct into the subclavian, okay, the thoracic duct would be A, okay. See, I'm even telling you, entrance of the right lymphatic duct, guys, is on this side. You could just figure that the entrance to the other one is on the other side, okay. See, but sometimes you guys don't read this stuff, okay, and so it's given to you right there, and then your lymphatic. The thoracic duct is C, all of this portion. C that takes this, and then all of the legs. And then the lymphatic collecting vessels, of course, would be E. So let me see, from 21 to 25. No one missed 21, no one missed 22, 2 people missed 23, 3 people missed 24, and 3 people missed 25. So low number, okay? But nonetheless, be careful that you don't miss those. All right, then on this one I told you that one is not used and one is used twice. So if you look at these ones, okay, these are the afferents, and the afferents are nowhere to be seen over here. That's the one that you did not use. Okay, the afferents. Then you have the efferent, which is like smaller, right? Remember, we need a whole bunch of afferents so that we can get a lot of lymph, and then just a singular efferent so that it pulls and it takes its time. And then once by the time it exits, it should be nice, clean lymph. Then we looked at this ones. Right there, this structure right here, you see these little partitions? Those are the trabeculae, right, which are the partitions. And then you see this one right here on the outside is the cortex. And then D is medulla, and part of the medulla, the medullary cords, which are like these, are in the medulla, okay? So this is the one that was used twice, the medulla. Medulla and medullary cords. So efferents, E, cortex, C, the medullary cord, D, the trabecula, A, and then the medulla, D, okay? So medullary cord and medulla were the ones that I used twice. And I told you, medullary cords and medulla are the same thing. If you look at the diagram where you see medulla, the medullary cords are part of the medulla, okay? All right, and then this one, okay, so another one of these, the thoracic duct, you know that's the left one. The spleen, always linked with blood. The lymph, always linked with lymph, right? Of course, is the fluid, right? Lymph nodes, filters and then Peyer's patches on the intestines. So protein-containing fluid within lymphatic systems, that's gonna be lymph. Stores blood platelets, that would be the spleen. Receives lymph from most of the body, that would be the thoracic duct. Small organs intimately associated with lymphatic vessels, that would be the lymph nodes. Largest lymphatic organ, that would be the spleen. Remember, it's pretty large. And then isolated clusters of lymph follicles found in the wall of the small intestine, that would be Peyer's patches. So let's see, 31 to 36. Let's see, 31. One person missed 31, 3 people missed 32, no one missed 33, no one missed 34, 5 people missed 35, and 1 person missed 36. So low numbers here. So that's good because you know the general structures. Okay. See again, guys, I don't ask you for like really detailed stuff because the details is in the books. If you forget something, all you do is you go back to dust off your old anatomy book and pull it out, right? Right. But the importance is the general stuff. Can like like if I said, where's the appendix? You go, okay, I know that it's in the right lower quadrant. It's over here, right? And then later on you just kind of go very general information. All right. Small organs associated with lymphatic vessels, I had just asked you the lymph nodes, okay? Which of the following would not be classified as a lymphatic structure? The pancreas. The spleen is, the tonsils are, and Peyer's patches are. As a matter of fact, right, so the pancreas is not. The pancreas has more of digestive properties, as well as endocrine. We will see later on. Let's see who's that. Here you go, Disney. The distal portion of the small intestine contains clumps of lymph follicles that are called Peyer's patches. Okay, islets and Langerhans, those they're not it, right? So the rugae and the villi, these are part of like the stomach, but they're not. They're not what we're talking about in this chapter. 40. Okay, so let's see, 39. 2 people missed 39. Number 40. Which lymphatic structure drains lymph from the right upper limb and the right side of the head and thorax? The right lymphatic duct, guys. Right. You see? Right. So number 40. Let's see. 2 people missed number 40. Okay. What do you guys put? Thoracic duct? The thoracic will be left. Okay. Maybe you confused it. 41. Lymph leaves a lymph node via the efferent. The efferent. A for exit. A for advance. Towards afferent. Leave efferent. Okay, efferent. 42. Lymphoid tissue that appears as a swelling of the mucosa in the oral cavity immediately take all of those are the tonsils. Right? Tubular tonsils, palatine tonsils, lingual tonsils, all of those, just tonsil in general. 43. Which of the following is not a mucosa? Which is not part of the malt? The thymus is not. Tonsils are, appendix is, and Peyer's patches is. Right? The thymus. It is, right? It's a bilobe thing, but it's not part of the mucosa association. What is a bubo? This one, 8 people missed this one. Remember we talked about bubonic plague? I said the Black Death. This is where the Yersinia pestis bacterium makes residence in the lymph nodes, swells them, and turns them black. So it's an infected lymph node. Okay? An infected lymph node. The only thing that you probably could have confused it, maybe what an infectious pairs patch. No, I don't know. Let's see, 44. 8 people missed it. So what do you guys put? Maybe wall in the lymph node, or I don't know. I figured it. Bubonic. Then you would link it to bubonic plague. All right, and then this one we get to this ones. Okay, so this is gonna be the first line, second line, third line of defense, innate or adaptive, right? So on this one, okay, so these are our choices. First line, which of these is a first line of defense? Intact skin and mucous membranes.
That's
Okay?
first.
That's first line of defense, right? That's our fortress. That's the one that it first, a bug to get us sick, it first has to go through like our skin, and then the keratinization, the sebum, the oils, the sweat, all that stuff is not gonna let it hopefully invade us. Second line of defense of the choices here would be an inflammatory response, perhaps released by some basophils, some other sorts of leukotrienes or prostaglandins of some sort, right? The next one, a third line of defense, now we get a little bit deeper, that would actually be an immune response to your body, right? Through the process of antibodies, B cells, T cells, all of those are part of the immune response. And then an innate defense system would be the inflammatory response as well as mucous membranes. Because we all have the ability to trigger inflammation as well as we all have mucous membranes. Okay, so those are innate. If you didn't know what the word innate, you can ask me, Mr. I, what does innate mean? And I will tell you, oh, that means from birth. And I would, okay, yeah, I think I can figure it out. And then, here you go, everyone. And then the next one, the adaptive defense system. When it's adaptive, you need to first get sick, right? The defense system, that would be like the immune response. You would need to actually get those antibodies formed, B cells or T cells. Okay, then we get to the immuno 45 to 49. Let me look at the numbers. 2 people miss 45, 4 people miss 46, 4 people miss 47, 6 people miss 48, and 6 people miss 49. So it looks like 6, 6, 4, 4, like you swapped it, okay? 40, okay, good. 49 was 6 people. From 50 to 54, the immunoglobulins. Main antibody of both primary and secondary. Okay, that would be immunoglobulin G, right? Primary and secondary immune response would be immunoglobulin G. Protects the mucosal barriers, that would be immunoglobulin A. Because it's gonna be the intestinal juices, the sweat, all the stuff with A's, right? The secretions. Involved in allergies, immunoglobulin E, Allegra E. Along with immunoglobulin M, this is a B cell receptor, that would be immunoglobulin D. And it activates the complement, it would be your immunoglobulin M. Remember, complement, the end, right in the middle of the, yes. Yes.
Question about that. Well, I got 50 right, but I was just kind of confused about that one though.
On 54?
Just 50, between 50 and 54.
Okay.
I thought IgM was the first responder. Or not the first responder. Yeah.
But it's what we make G, because G, if you look at it, it's both one primary and secondary response. M is only for primary.
Oh, okay.
And then G is the late stage of primary and all of secondary.
Oh, okay, so that's what I was saying.
Yeah. Maybe in the future we'll word it like say the late stage, or just probably just wipe out primary and just leave secondary. I think that probably would help.
I was like really.
But that's what I see, and I think that was one, the 13 of you missed it, number 15, and you got a point for that. Okay, so that's what, so yeah, so I'll change the wording on that one so in the future it doesn't confuse me. All right, and then it says, which of the following is associated with passive immunity, guys? The passage of immunoglobulin G antibodies from a pregnant mother to her fetus. And if you wanted to be more specific, you would say, oh, this is what is called passive natural immunity, right? Exposure to the antigen, what would that be? What would if you were to be asked, what kind of immunity are these?
Active natural.
That would be active natural. Infusion of a weakened virus, active artificial. And then the booster shot, that would be passive artificial. That's right? Yes. All right. Let's see, I included all of them, but it was this one was the only one that made sense in terms of passive immunity. Passive artificial immunity. Next one now. B lymphocytes develop, where do they B lymphocytes develop immunocompetency? In the bone marrow. That's what we call them B cells, right? If it was T lymphocytes develop immunocompetency, then the choice would have been in the thymus. Okay? This one, in the lecture notes was when we had the lymphocytes, and there was like, they branched out, and one side was like a bone, and the other side was like a thymus, remember? And then I told you, no matter, what eventually they become, they both start from bone marrow. But then these guys develop the immunocompetency in the bone marrow, and these guys develop the immunocompetency in the thymus. Then eventually they both circulate in the bloodstream and live, and they make it to like the lymph nodes, the spleen, and all this stuff. Okay, but
So the spleen is just actually like organ to.
two for filtration of blood, right? But you need the lymphocytes to clean blood as well, right? So where are you gonna get those lymphocytes from? From bone marrow, because remember, in the spleen, you're gonna have white pulp and red pulp. The red pulp is gonna be all the worn out red blood cells. The white pulp is gonna be B and T lymphocytes suspended in reticular tissue. So you find B cells and T cells, guys, in the of course bone marrow and the thymus, right? But they also circulate into the system. You'll find them in lymph nodes. You'll find them in the tonsils, right, in the little crypts. You'll find them in any lymphoid tissue. Okay. And we constantly, those that die, we constantly replenish them. Okay, we produce blood cells, guys, at a rate of about 2 million per second.
And the bone marrow don't actually like fight infections,
They just produce the red, and then those guys go to because that's not the job of the bone marrow. The bone marrow is just like the factory, and then the lymph nodes and the immune system knows like what to do with those organs. And then the next one, so which ones predominate the site of chronic infection? The macrophages, because they're the ones that are going to engulf any foreign. Even the video showed you that those guys, remember, some are like free moving macrophages and some like are stable, and then they reach with the pseudopods and engulf them. The other shows would have probably made more sense if I had included, but I did not, like neutrophils, possibly, right? Because infections, but this one, chronic infections. You have to have these macrophages. Has to be cleaning tissue. Interferons, they interfere with viral replication within cells, right? So that was a whole lot. And they're not virus specific. Probably some people that see 58. 8 people chose this one. They're not virus specific. That's why I told you interferons work against any virus that you encounter. Okay. And I put it that because I knew that people were like, we're gonna read it and it's like, they're not virus specific, guys, okay? 59. Which of the following is not an autoimmune disease? Type 2 diabetes is not. It's adult onset. The rest are. 59. Let's see. 2 people missed it. You probably picked type 2 diabetes. Okay, so multiple sclerosis, it is an autoimmune. Okay, systemic lupus erythematosus and glomerulonephritis. Now there are people doing helminths, like hookworms. They're treating people with that have multiple sclerosis with they infect you with parasites, and the multiple sclerosis is going away. It's pretty cool. It's interesting.
And what is letter B?
Which one? Glomerulonephritis is gonna be, we're gonna talk about later on, is gonna be a condition in your kidneys. Inside your kidneys, we have these little balloons are called glomeruli, that when blood enters, it filters it, they start getting destroyed. And then the people, I've met a few people that have had this condition, you start swelling, you start retaining a lot of water. And it's because your kidneys starting to fail. So it's kidney failure. And it's not, we'll talk about glomerulonephritis.
So you need dialysis.
And then, yeah, you usually need dialysis or a transplantation of a new kidney. We have about 1.3 million of these nephrons per kidney, and when 2/3 of them, as long as 1/3 is working, your kidneys are still working. But as long as you pass that, you're gonna consider renal failure. 1.3 million, guys. These little things inside. We'll see them later on. Okay. And then the number 60, which of these cells is the most critical in cell immunity? I kept emphasizing the helper T cell. Without helper T cell, you cannot mount an immune response. And that's the number 64, and you just missed it. Okay, so again, okay.
I can fit.
So any questions on this one? So again, the average was 81.2, which means it was a good test. Again, take your time with them, and then they don't get any harder or any. This is as hard as I make them. okay? I mean, they really, that's it, right? So, I don't make them hard, it's like, is it really hard? Like, no, it is what it is. Just keep coming to class, the key is be here in class. The people, I noticed that the people that score the lowest is people that are like, consistently not here. And it affects you, it does affect you. Okay? All right. Chapter 21? Chapter 22, the respiratory. 21 was the title. The beginning, the title section. All right. In this chapter, okay, we're going to talk about the respiratory system. If you recall from, you're going to kind of have a reminder of 1306, where you guys took 1306. Okay. Oh. Okay. What is that formula for? Do you guys remember?
Slow. The power of energy.
Slow.
Energy, right? ATP.
Yeah. So what do we call that? What is that? The formula for? You guys remember? What's the process?
Powerhouse of the cell.
Cellular respiration, right? This is cellular respiration. Let's kind of go through the components so you guys can kind of see the importance of breathing. Okay. So cellular respiration is we take a glucose molecule, which is a carbohydrate. It's a carbohydrate with a combination of oxygen that we're going to breathe. Okay. It's going to break down. It's gonna go. This goes through three processes. It goes through first. It gets broken down in the mitochondria. Okay, remember that? That one's the first step is called glycolysis. The glycolysis means sugar splitting, right? The glycolysis generates 2 ATPs. A total of 4, but you use 2, so you're left with a net of 2. Then it breaks it into what were those 2 molecules called? You remember?
Is phosphate? Or what are you talking
Well,
about?
they're gonna go through the process, but when you're done with all those 10 steps of glycolysis,
Pyruvate?
the pyruvates, yes, right? Then the pyruvates, we call them pyruvates or pyruvic acids, okay, are gonna be produced. They enter which cycle? The Krebs, that's gonna be the second step. The Krebs cycle goes through, also produces 2 more ATPs, so now we're at 4. And then finally, right, with acetylcholine, and SMA, all that, what is the third thing that we enter? Which is like the beef, the main one.
Electron
The
transport.
electron transport chain, right? The ETC, the electron transport chain. This one is the one that by far generates us the most ATPs. Okay, this one is gonna generate us anywhere like 32 to 34 ATPs. Usually it's like 34. So we can end up with anywhere between 36 to 38 ATPs per glucose molecule. Okay, per glucose molecule. Now that's under aerobic conditions. If for some reason we don't have oxygen, there's a lack of oxygen, we're going to revert to what we call anaerobic right, respiration, which is going to lead to fermentation. So this isn't the presence of oxygen, right? Oxygen present. When oxygen is not present, then we end up with this thing called fermentation. Okay, anaerobic fermentation. And this anaerobic fermentation will lead us to, okay, there's 2 types of fermentations, okay, in plants and animals. Okay, in plants, what do we produce?
Oxygen. What do you mean?
When there's no oxygen, what is the byproduct of anaerobic fermentation?
Ethanol?
Right? Alcohol, yes, alcohol.
Oh.
This is how we make beer and wine and all this stuff, right? Alcohol.
Thank you, plants.
Okay? Yes. Right? That's proof that God loves us and He wants us to be happy, right? Right? How about in us animals? It would be cool if we produce alcohol, right? But we don't, right?
Just naturally get drunk.
Lactic acid. Lactic acid, right? Lactic acid. This is why when we're not aerobic, we're very sore the next day. Right? That accumulation of lactic acid in our muscles, and you have to massage and get it out of the way, right? So yes, so in here, this one, in anaerobic fermentation, we only, one glucose molecule, one glucose, only yields us 2 ATPs. versus 38, 36 to 38. No wonder you're really sore. You still made a little bit of ATP. You made it work, but at a cost.
Oh, so that's when we're exercising. That's
Yes.
what produces it. Okay.
Yes, right? When you're exercising and you're not very aerobic, okay? You're gonna be like in an oxygen deficit and you only produce 2 ATPs. So you can kind of see the importance of oxygen. No oxygen, no ATP, no life test, no homeostasis. ATP is like we call it remember we drilled it and you're like, what is this stupid ATP when we're in 1306? I still remember like 20 plus years ago when I was like, when I took the biology, I was like, ATP, what is this? Okay, but now years later, like, you kind of understood like the concept, and so that's why it's very important, right? ATP has 3 main functions. And that's it. Let's go through them. 3 functions. Good way to remember, I learned the 3 functions of ATP on TMC, on the movie channel. Okay? So if you remember that one, you'll never forget them. Okay? So you learn about ATP on TMC. The first function of ATP is transport. Can you think of the transport function of ATP? Okay, how about transport? Active and passive transport. This one is going to be active because how about the sodium potassium pump? Okay, right? So let's give we'll put here example. So you can have at least one example. The sodium potassium pump needs ATP for the transportation for every 2 sodiums, 3 potassium. Remember that, the whole deal? We're not going to go over all of that, right? But that's going to be a transport function of ATP. What about the M stands for mechanical? How about the actin myosin? What is that for? Muscle contractions, right? With muscle contractions, so muscle movement. And movement of some other stuff. That's we call that mechanical function of ATP. And the third one is chemical. Chemical, okay, you saw this, remember that fancy term? Phosphorylation of enzymes. If I have the enzyme lactase, and here comes lactose, right? It needs a phosphorus, it needs an ATP to go through here and bind to activate the enzymes. Enzymes, we have a whole bunch of enzymes, but without ATP, there is almost like a toy without a battery. You need to plug an ATP. That's going to be a chemical function. Okay? So that's why oxygen is going to be super important, because without oxygen, we cannot carry out these necessary functions of our body. I mean, think about it. If you could, what would happen like if your sodium potassium pump was like your nervous system wouldn't work, right? Your nervous system requires the sodium potassium. If it was this way, you couldn't move because your muscles would be like this, right? And then if it was this, the phosphorylation, you would drink milk and it probably would kill you with a real bad diarrhea because you wouldn't activate the enzymes. We have all these different enzymes, lipases, and all these things, okay, that are needed. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about in this chapter: the importance of the oxygen. Not like this in terms of the ATP. I just wanted to give you guys an overview so that you never forget why you took 1306. It's like trying to do calculus without never doing algebra. It's like you don't even know how to add or subtract it. They ask you to integrate by parts, right? Or do the agreement sum or something, then you don't know how to do it. Okay? So, all right. So let's get started in the chapter for this one. So the mechanisms of breathing occurs in 2 phases. The first one, of course, is breathing air in. We're going to call that inspiration, which is like inhaling. Inhalation and inspiration is kind of like synonymous. Then the bringing out of these gases, that is going to be the expiration or the exhalation, right? The exhaling. So in here, the breathing, when we bring it into the air through the nose and mouth, we bring up, it's called bulk flow, because it's like a lot of air. It's just like a lot of air that is brought in. Then it starts like splitting as it gets smaller, the bronchi gets smaller, until eventually, at the end of the bronchi, we have these little, they look like clusters of grapes. They really do, like they're called alveoli. At the level of the alveoli, they're like balloons wrapped with capillaries. Now, if the moment you hear capillaries, you know, oh, gas exchange is happening, right? Sure enough, the oxygen comes from throat and, okay, down the trachea, splits into the bronchi, into the alveoli. Now the little balloons get filled with oxygen. Now we have high concentration of oxygen in the alveoli, low concentration of oxygen in the capillaries, where the red blood cells are passing by. So guess where we're gonna shove oxygen? If I have capillaries, okay, let me do it right now. You kind of look at me like yours with the head, like right here, all right. So we have, here's our trachea, and then there's a few more over here. And then at the very end, we have a whole bunch of these guys. And they're gonna be wrapped around, and then there's gonna be like another layer. We'll talk about that later right now. These are called alveoli. Alveolus, singular, alveoli, plural. This alveoli, let's magnify one. It looks like this. And then it's wrapped around by capillaries. This is a capillary, okay? Capillary. Remember in capillary, we said that the red blood cells form single file? Okay. All right? All of us do this. Right now, we just did the process of blood flow into our lungs. All of the oxygen is accumulated in the alveoli. And remember, there's millions of these, okay? It's not just like one, but it's millions of these. A lot of oxygen. Then, okay, so diffusion tells us that we're gonna move some sort of solid from a high concentration to a low concentration. So my question was, from the alveoli, where do we shove that oxygen into?
Red blood cells?
Into the red blood cells, right? So yes, so they're gonna go this. Okay, by the millions. Think of like how many millions of red blood cells we have. So that means you actually have millions and millions and millions of oxygen molecules. Now, the red blood cells just went all the way feeding your body with oxygen. What did they pick up on the way?
Carbon dioxide.
The carbon dioxide, right? So now carbon dioxide, we're gonna put it in red here. Where is it heavily concentrated? In the red blood cells. So where is carbon dioxide gonna be shoved into? Out into the alveoli. So now we're gonna see CO2. Right there, that little exchange of the two gases, that's called gas exchange. So gas exchange is occurring not here. This is just merely again, sucking in wind. Where it matters is in the alveoli. These are the ones that have the structure. This is just like a vacuum, guys, and all everything is being collected in the bag, right, on the vacuum. Here, this is right here at the capillaries. This is where your gas exchange is occurring. You shoved oxygen and you picked up carbon dioxide. Now the carbon dioxide simply is exhaled. That's what we don't want. We don't need that, right? That's gonna be our waste. That's gonna be the carbon dioxide. See right now, so if you had breakfast this morning and you're breathing, you're already processing the glucose. And you're already making CO2, which we're breathing out. You're making water, which we're sweating and pooping and peeing, right, throughout the day. And you're making ATP. We make ATP, we make 2/3 our weight. So if you weigh 150 pounds, you make about 100 pounds of ATP a day. That's a lot of ATP, right? The other reason we don't weigh that much is because we use it throughout the day, these functions. Okay? Just think of how much ATP is required for me to make a fist. It's impressive the amount of ATP. So see how you start linking it all together? The key is like all this. Know this? This can be broken down, and you're gonna end up with like diabetes and things like that, so you need ATP. Okay? Okay, so let's go back in here. So this right here, that's gonna be shoving in oxygen is gonna remember, by the way, remember that oxygen, both oxygen and carbon dioxide are non-polar gases. Being non-polar, what advantage does it give you?
Non-polar?
Uh-huh.
They don't have the positive or...
Yeah, remember, if it's non-polar, that means that they can easily diffuse through the membrane. Right? You don't need any challenge, they diffuse through the membrane. That's called passive diffusion, right? The passive transport. They don't need any, this process right here doesn't require like the ATP. This one is just kind of happens. Okay, so these non-polar gases, that means that they can diffuse through the membrane, which is very important because if you think of our cells have that phospholipid bilayer that looks something like this. Remember this one? Okay, and then if here's oxygen can easily diffuse where it's needed. And then the carbon dioxide can easily leave. Okay? If they were polar, they would have a harder time. For example, like water that's a polar. See, you wouldn't introduce anything polar to these guys because these guys are like the remember these are like the non-polar. They let it go through. Okay, so it all goes back to that bilipid layer that talks about like the importance of the polarity. So anyways, let's continue because if I start like going into this is more like molecular cell biology, it confuses me, right? If we go to but let's continue. All right. So now let's talk about the relationship between pressure and volume. Okay, and so that we understand what we're going to talk about here. So respiratory pressure is always described relative to atmospheric pressure. Right now, okay, we're surrounded by atmosphere. There's gases that are exerting pressures on us, even if you don't feel them. Okay, and there's oxygen is not the only gas that is present in the atmosphere. We have water vapor when it's like humid. We have carbon dioxide. We have nitrogen. Okay, all of these different gases exert pressures on us. At sea level, and we're gonna kind of use sea level. When you go up above sea level, it changes, right? Like when water boils and all of that. But at sea level, okay, there was a guy, an Italian scientist. His name was Evangelista Torricelli, and he designed this thing. They look kind of like a U made of glass, and then on this side over here, it was graduated. And then over here was open so that you can exert the pressure. He noticed that at atmospheric pressure, this stuff was full of mercury. Okay. Then he noticed that the pressure that at sea level, it always pushed the mercury to 760 millimeters of mercury. So we call that 1 atmosphere. So 1 ATM. 1 atmosphere is equal to 760 millimeters of mercury. Okay? So if we say, when you probably see like, 2 atmospheres. In chemistry, you're going to do probably with like atmospheres, where we're talking about like the gases. 2 atmospheres is just 760 times 2. 3 atmospheres, 760 times 3. If it's 1.5 atmospheres, 1.5 atmospheres, it's 760 plus a half of 760. Right? If it's 1.25, it's 760 plus a quarter of 760. Okay, so 2 atmospheres, how many millimeters of mercury is it?
2 atmospheres.
It's gonna be like 760 times 2, right? 1460, or whatever it is, right? Okay, I got a math teacher, that's okay, right? But somewhere around there. Okay, so I'm not gonna ask you how to calculate pressures either, don't worry about it, okay? I'm just telling you, when you see a problem, people say, 2 atmospheres. Okay, you understand what's going on is 2 of 760. They also call 1 atmosphere 761 torr. Of course, after Torricelli, right? So 1 torr is also 760. So this is gonna be a very important number that we're gonna keep. Our lungs and the pressure in the atmosphere and the pressure in our lungs eventually has to equalize. 760 has to equal 760. When that happens, okay, there's like no more air coming in and out of the lung. So what do I need to do to bring in air into my body?